here with Bob Landis, who is a founding partner of the Origination team at the Riverside Company, which is a global private equity firm focused on making control and non-control investments in growing businesses valued up to 400 million. Investors and Operators podcast, or all the content I'm doing, is to humanize our market. We can know the who, the what in the companies in our industry. What I really want to know is the why. So Bob, my first question for you is, what gets you up in the morning? You've been doing this for a while now. How do you have the same amount of energy and motivation and drive to do this?
Oh gosh, that old adage, and I'm going to steal some of these adages from other people, but if you enjoy what you're doing, you never have to work a day in your life. I got hired 18 years ago to reinvent Origination. At that time, we called it deal sourcing. And that's what it was, but a little bit pejorative term. And Origination is, over time, is I think, more appropriate. We can talk about that later. But I was hired to create a function within our firm. And at that time, I was the 23rd employee. Now there's, about 235 employees at Riverside plus another 50 operating partners. But as we grew, I just got more and more involved in helping to create a function that actually worked. When I joined, my predecessor had been there for 4 or 5, maybe 8 years, and he had a list of 4,000 names, and he had 6 email addresses. I mean, 6, I don't think about that. And the contacts and the information flow wasn't very, very strong. Now we have 20, 30, 40,000 names. I can assure you everybody has an email address. We have details on each person in a positive sense, what they do, what they like. We try to make it as human possible when we're talking to people. There's just so much to do. So yeah, what keeps me up in the morning is just, if this is a firm that people enjoy working with each other, and I've been at some pretty dismal organizations in the past where my clients were great, the people I worked with weren't so much,
Yeah.
And that kept me there. But this is, I've had great clients, and I thrive on finding new opportunities. I used to do deals and used to put them together. Now I find them. At some point in my life, my attention span became closer to nanoseconds. So I enjoy putting the deals together, and I don't mind. Once I've curated it, I've developed a relationship with the investment bank or the person bringing me an opportunity, and could be the CEO himself. I pass it off to our transaction team, which we call investment professionals. They're the ones that will live with this investment for 4 or 5 years now. I have some responsibility, and I have some love of that company. I'm responsible for finding add-ons if it comes on board. But there's so many things to do and so many new companies to learn and deal with. I mean, every time I pick up a widget, I say, who makes this? Why do they make it? Is there competition? I never thought about that 18 years ago. I was, my last job was to run the aerospace and the defense division for Deutsche Bank, and running a small group of people, but working with the Fortune 500 in aerospace and defense. I know who makes an F-18. I know who makes an F-16. But the little widgets that go in there, that's the things that we're buying now. We bought 5 or 6 companies, smaller little add-ons to one of our portfolio companies, making very, very precision titanium based material and widgets and components into a mainframe of an F-16 or an F-18 or a Huey helicopter. It's just fascinating. I saw it in a museum one time, and something goes like every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion, or it will be killed. Every morning, a lion wakes up. It knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle, or it will starve to death. The moral? It doesn't matter if you are a lion or you are a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. Anyway, I had this attitude before I read it, but I said, that kind of says it. It's not about the competition. It's just, if you want to succeed, you want to excel, you want to create something. If you aren't moving, your competitors will.
But it seems like your motivation is less about a competitive dynamic and competitive push, but there's just something different about you, of this, like, I sense this, like in our interactions, there's just something different about you and your level of interest in other people. And I'm curious to know, where does that come from? Why do you know just 10 times more about other people than what most people think to ask and think to dive deep into?
I would say part of it's curiosity. I'm always trying to figure out why they did that and I didn't. Call it self-improvement. But I'm also just trying to figure out what makes people work, and it helps me to figure out what makes me work. And every day I'm having realizations about myself. And you would think at my age that have been long gone, but I'm thinking of things that I did 20, 30, 40 years ago, and now I understand why I did them. So by asking other people, you're constantly reevaluating your own life and hopefully to make yourself better. And so I look at people as a reflection of me and things I can learn from them. So I'm always asking them questions. As I said, you never learn by talking about yourself. You learn by asking other people questions. So my guess is I probably know more about most people than they know about me, because I find it boring talking about me, except for this iPod that you asked me to put together. But that's kind of how I look at things. And it's just fascinating. When I talk about a business, I like to get to know people, not because you have to and you should, because that's a good salesman approach, but maybe it comes across as genuine, because I come back a couple of days later. When I get back to the office, I sometimes put these personal things in there, like kids and family. And when they call and I can get a chance to maybe pull up our CRM, I'll look into it and I say, oh, that reminds me, what about, what are they doing now? It could be 3 years later. People appreciate that you're at least taking the time, and I'm not doing it to get a kudo, but it just fosters a deeper understanding of what drives that person.
I think, if I understand correctly, you've recently taken up the fiddle or the violin.
Yeah, I did.
How did you decide to do that? And can you talk us through what it's like to learn something completely new?
It's exciting because there's no place to go but up. If you get to be a star at something, if you're not training to your top, you decline. When I start, I still can't read music. I know where the notes are, and I have to listen to it, and I'm forcing myself to understand where the notes are, but I have to listen to it. But it's exciting because each time I can see an improvement. If you're in finance, what do you see improvement? You get a bigger bonus. That's not who you are. But something that you can do, maybe lifting weights, you can do. But once you reach a certain maximum, there's only a downhill. When you're starting something new, it's exciting. I mean, when I was in college, I wanted to learn an instrument, so I taught myself to play the harmonica and then the recorder. But those are kind of simple things you can kind of figure out and play with the notes, and you can listen to music and you can figure out what key to play. But violin or fiddle, there's not much difference between a violin and a fiddle. It's just a person playing it, and maybe the strings, maybe they're steel, maybe they're catgut. So I'm, not ready for Carnegie Hall, never will be, and probably not ready to play in front of anybody in their tune. But I just enjoy seeing a progression, and this environment is giving me more time to play. Not every day. I think we all get sort of down and say, "Got to do this," and you put it off because you're doing work. But yeah, I didn't know you knew about that, the fiddle, but yes.
I do my research. So
I'm impressed.
let's rewind a little bit and tell us where you're from and just what it was like growing up before you went to the military.
Yeah, I grew up in a very, really small town at the time called Napanee, Indiana, born in Elkhart. Something like 50% of the people in Napanee were Amish. So you're driving in your 55 Studebaker and there's somebody with a horse and buggy coming the other way. And I had babysitters who were Amish. So I got to see a whole different side of life. My grandfather grew up in a town called Convoy, Ohio. It's not even on the map still, I don't think, but it's right between Van Wert and Fort Wayne, Van Wert, Ohio. Little farm town. He was a mechanic, and at that time he could make things. He had a giant garage. He had a lathe, and he would grind his own gears. He would make pieces out of metal. If he didn't have the car part, he had to drive 20 miles away to Van Wert to get all the parts. And he was the only garage in town. And I grew up in that environment, and I wonder why so many farmers were always bringing him food. They bring him cauliflower and potatoes, and tomatoes, and meat, because they didn't have cash. So it was. I didn't realize till later in college and high school this was the real barter system back in the 50s. And he would work on their tractors. He would work on their trucks. He would drive out to see them, always in a good mood. And I didn't realize that. I just sort of got an attitude that that's kind of new. You're working with the people that you're collecting from, but you're giving something to them as well. So I grew up in the Midwest my entire life, moved to Illinois, a small little high school of 4,000 people. So that was a shock coming from a little town like Napanee. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Western Springs before, but going to high school with 4,000, that's a small college. never got overwhelmed by it. Just got to try to meet as many people as I could and kind of learn from them and figure they knew more than me. And so they realized we're all on the same voyage. Everybody's trying to learn from everybody else. And then you sort of figure out the ones that are schmoozers and the ones that are a little bit disingenuous in life and the ones that are really a person you want to get to know better.
What kind of person were you in high school? How would you characterize yourself?
Okay athlete, not great. I mean, I did the rings, high bar in high school and thought I was really good till I went to a couple of the tournaments and saw how good really good is. Did cross country. I always regret I never did football or any of the other team sports, but my sons clearly surpassed me on that, and I got them involved in all that. So I didn't learn as much about teamwork, but I always learned about working with people, and I think that's helped me well.
When you transitioned into the military, can you talk a little bit just about your experience? How long were you in, and maybe even more importantly, your transition out?
Yeah, well, there's I guess you call it the long gray line. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and that was during World War II. And he was with Patton's 3rd Division. And he was in the artillery. And, I was always sort of fascinated by that. Never thought I was going to go in the Army. My brother, oldest brother, had asthma, so he couldn't go in. And so I never thought much about it. Then my other brother, 4 years older than me, went to the Citadel. So from a Yankee going down to South back in that time, it was it was a unique experience. But he did well. He went into armor and spent quite a few years there, and then moved over to a different branch. But he spent 20 years. Got out as lieutenant colonel as well. And I guess I just thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. And this was, of course, during the Vietnam War, so not a lot of people thought about this is what I'm going to do. They had to think long and hard. And I went through ROTC. That was a decision. It was tough for me to make. My dad wanted me to go, and he said, you have to go for the first 2 years, then you can drop out if you want. And I remember him asking me after the first 2 years, are you going to stay in? Well, that was a pregnant. We were on a boat, and I didn't even answer for about 3 minutes because that was it. I had to say yes or no because, with your father, it's not great. And I finally said, okay, I'll just do the plunge. Yeah, I'm gonna stay on the next 2 years. And at that time, you're surrounded by a lot of people in college. Vietnam War wasn't terribly popular. I had short hair at the University of Colorado. Everybody had long, so right away you were sort of identified as not cool. But I will say that it's the best thing I ever did. I mean, it taught me so much when I went in there for those 6 years, going through the training programs. After ROTC, you go through advanced training. I was in there for 6 years. And then I decided, okay, I've done what I need to do. I've proved to me that I can make good decisions. So at the end of those 6 years, I said, I've done what I need to do. And I am at a point that, do I want to stay in or try something different? It was a big risk. Everybody says, well, to get out of the military, that's easy. It's pretty simple life. You're with people, you're with a team, the team I didn't have in high school or college. You're with people you enjoy working together with, and there's no pretense. You know what they make. You don't have to worry about wearing fancy clothes because we all wore the same clothes, same uniform. So there's a lot of decisions that just stripped away to just dealing with the person. You know what their rank is, they're in charge or they're not. You work together and you all work as a team no matter what. And getting back into the real world was a real dilemma for me. I said, gee, I'm so used to it. I know where my salary's coming from. I know what I have to do. Obviously, you're in harm's way or not, but the rest of it is pretty simple in life. And getting out in the civilian life after you've been in the military is a rough transition, I think. It was for me. I had to start thinking about my medical, my health care. I had to start thinking about how do I get a car? How do I make money? What about my housing? It's just all the things that we take for granted that people have grown up in college that didn't go in the military. You got to start all over. And then
Can you put this into context and approximately what year was it?
I got in 76, 77. I came out of active in late 76, early 77, and then went to grad school. Came home a little bit early. I spent about 6-9 months over in Germany. My last assignment and just kind of hung out. By hung out, I got a job, taught at the Berlitz School, something different I'd never done before, thinking about being a teacher. And then my father, I was notified, was he had terminal cancer. And I came back early, spent 3 months with him, and postponed going to grad school till the summer while he passed away. And then went to grad school and then started looking for jobs. Had some offers in New York City. Had some offers with some great banks that I thought I could have a career with, like Continental Illinois, Pacific Crest. You probably don't even remember who those are. Those are big banks in the Midwest. Thank God I went to Chemical Bank in New York, and I had an offer from Chase as well. And of course, Chemical, Chase, man, had all merged together at JP Morgan. So I would have been with them. But, and then I transitioned from commercial banking to investment banking, and then, of course, to private equity.
If we can rewind just a little bit, because I think it's important, kind of who you are. I look at my dad, who passed from a brain tumor, my brother, who passed from a brain tumor, and just how, I posted about this last week, and I felt guilty just because, it's been 5 to 10 years, and it's almost like I forgot who they were. And my mom messaged me, and she said, it's your dad's birthday. And I felt guilty for not being emotionally connected to that. And it was only in the past couple of weeks when I just was reminded of how they've affected me. So I'd just like to know, like, how did he impact you and the person that you've become?
As they say, no person is ever useless. You can always learn from them what to do and what not to do. And I learned a lot of things about my father. Some I learned after he passed, about his life, as I talked to my brothers, because I was fairly young when, not young when he passed, of course, but I never really focused so much on my father. My first two brothers, they were much closer. My dad he was in World War II when my oldest brother was still just a kid. So when they reunited, it was pretty strong. I just kind of plopped into a normal family. It was a lot of transition during the 50s and 60s when I was born. But he was always not very vocal, pretty taciturn. Ergo that conversation on the boat, first vacation he ever took with me ever, alone, because both my brothers already graduated. They're off, and one was in Vietnam, one was working, and I was still in high school. Sorry, not high school, but second year in college. It was a real bonding experience, but I didn't exactly know how to respond, and I just simply yes, and very little emotion, but a little smile on his face. And I thought he was doing that because, I was in the military, your brother's in the military. In retrospect, it was the opportunity to learn more things in such a short period of time to make me grow up. And I really regret that we don't have a draft, not because I happen to think about the military as the right career. Other places have a draft that you can do social service, but something that yanks everybody out of their comfort zone, puts them in a situation where they have to give back to society one way or another. And that's what it did to me, being in the military. Having to counsel gentlemen that are 10 years, 15 years older than me on how to handle their marriage or how to handle their drinking problem. Here I am, a 23-year-old. That's your job. And you have to think about it long and hard. You have to get advice from other people. Sometimes you have to suck it up and hope you made the right decisions as to talk to these people. And sometimes you have to make some tough decisions towards punishment, towards teaching people that you just can't turn your head when they do something wrong, particularly in the military. Because if they do it in peacetime, they're going to do it in wartime, and bad things happen to other people.
You have, what, 2 sons?
2 sons, yeah.
If they're having this same conversation 40 years from now, what do you hope that they're going to say about you?
I said that you can learn a lot of things, what not to do. My dad spent a lot of time at work and a lot of time with my mother on the weekends playing golf. So I didn't see much of them. And I know that they would say that I spent probably a lot more time than I should have, and I don't regret a moment. So I hate to get emotional, but these are, things I don't usually talk about. But yeah, I'd say hopefully I've been a mentor to them, and hopefully I hope they've learned things that I've made mistakes at, bringing them up that they won't repeat. And that's, I think, when you have a parent, you can't blame them for everything. You can also learn from them the things that they should have done or they didn't do, and maybe because they couldn't. So I think I've given them a pretty good basis to make judgments when they become parents. Sure hope so.
I guess being an example and kind of going back to the military, can you talk about, there are so many veterans who are transitioning now, and it's a difficult time to do this. If they are, thinking about a career in finance, or just anything, what are some lessons that you would like to kind of share with the transitioning veteran community on general success for finding that next career?
Yeah, I'd say coming back to civilian, particularly if you've had 20 years in the military and those that have gone straight out of college like I did, whether enlisted or as an officer, I think it's a very difficult transition because you're used to asking for guidance, and in the military you get it. I think in civilian life, if you don't have the right mentor, you can ask for guidance, you won't get it, you might get sabotaged, or the guidance might be wrong because sometimes people don't know how to deal with other people if they haven't been in an organized environment. And it's like asking somebody directions. How many times have you gone up to somebody and you say, which way is this? And if they're hesitating, they're just going to tell you something because they feel they have to tell you something. And it's going to be the wrong one. And when I get that hesitation, I tell my sons, don't trust that person. I ask 2 or 3 more people because that's what people do. Either they want to help, and then there's always those mischievous people that send you the wrong way. Whereas in the military, you come back and you wind up trusting people. And I don't think 100% trust outside of the military or any close confinement is a good thing. There has to be a healthy skepticism. How many times do you open up your email from somebody and I say, I'm not going to click on that? And I got to the point now, I just delete it. Or I made a mistake one time. I sent an email back. I don't know if this is spam or not. What is this about? And the person sent it back to me. Oh, don't worry, this is such and such. I still sent it to our IT people and said, this is spam. I said, this guy's good. There's somebody who wants to destroy my laptop and he's taking the time to respond to my email. So I guess I would say, I hate to say don't trust, but just be very cautious who you trust in the civilian environment. If you are working with a group of people, you can tell those that, God, I hate to use the word suck up, but you can tell the people that are out for themselves. You can tell the people that really want to help, and the people that want you to grow as much as they want themselves to grow. Those are the mentors, and they may be peers and co-equals, but at some point you'll figure that out for yourself.
So it sounds like the key takeaway is like to find a mentor, almost like an informal advisory team to help you with that transition.
Yeah, I think so. And be careful, at least in the initial stages, sharing your personal life, because it can come back to bite you if you're too open. It's like everybody puts things up on YouTube and they put them up in the cloud, and that will come back to bite you if you're not cautious of what's been posted out there. I mean, the first thing a recruiter does is they start spinning and looking at all your Google sites and your YouTube. And I talk to people all the time that they don't give people the benefit of the doubt when they get that resume. They look and see, what is that person posted? And that may not be the impression you want to give to people.
When you look at Riverside, I mean, you started 18 years ago, and business development as a profession, I don't even know if it was really defined back then. Can you talk about just the evolution of business development or origination just as a profession within the deal community?
No, you're right. Business development really didn't exist. There were a group of about 10 or 15, and if I just mentioned a few, Florida Capital Partners had Jay Jester, uh, uh, David Malosha, Glenn Okens. Those guys were a team of business development. They've all went out to create their own jobs. Well, one went to Audex, and David and Glenn went and started their own companies. Gretchen Perkins started at one in PE firm, and now she's a rock star at Huron. If you look at Hammond Kennedy, the guy that was there,
Ted Kramer.
Ted Kramer, yeah, Ted. He played professional hockey for a while. Ted started business development at the same time I did. Now he's running that. So there was a small core of about 10 or 15, 20 of us that kind of got together and say, how do we break into the PE firm? Because we're sort of appendages, but nobody wants to do anything with us. And a few wise people that ran each of those firms said, we need somebody doing business development. Riverside, I think, was one of the very few at the very beginning. There were 3 people running Riverside, a business development guy and the 2 founding partners, Baylor Stewart and Stuart Cole. And they realized that they can't be chasing deals and doing deals with only 3 people. And if they're all chasing deals and suddenly they disappear from the face of the earth, running that deal into the ground, trying to buy it, whether it succeeds or not, when they come up for air, they go back to that investment bank and say, well, how come you haven't been showing me deals? They said, we haven't returned my emails for 3-4 months. And you do that a couple of times, your sources dry up. So they said, we need somebody to start bringing in the deal flow. And going back to that guy who did it, he had a database of 4,000. He wasn't tech savvy. I'm not saying I am, but he didn't do much by email, but he did a lot of phone. All the other people I've been talking to had the same issues with having to start it up, but they didn't have to create credibility within their firm. We at Riverside have always had it. And Stuart Cole will always say that origination is the lifeblood of deal flow for Riverside. And we've maintained that across all 9 funds now. The other ones, it was even more of a struggle to justify, to get paid. What do you do? This is my account. Why are you calling on this investment bank? Well, that's what I was hired to do. It took a long time, and I would mentor them a little bit because I didn't have to worry about that. It was just one less stumbling block that I had because I had the support, and Origination still does, and all the people that are on Origination at Riverside had the support of the original founders because this is a division of labor like Ford. It was tough, and the key point there in those days, 18 years ago, and we were all invited whenever we were in fundraising because they wanted to know who these people were. They said, well, why are you around? What are you doing? Can't these investment professionals do it? You had to justify over and over and over why you were key and important to the PE firm. Now, I can guarantee you, any limit that goes in, they want to talk to the person doing deal origination. They want to know what they're doing. And if they don't have a deal origination, now the partners and the founders of those PE firms have to justify why they haven't gone that route. Why haven't they spent more time specializing in the industry instead of being a generalist? Why they haven't gotten the idea of having operating partners? All the things, all the toolkit parts, the various aspects of PE world that are just generic now and necessary have to be justified why you don't have it.
So I think it's fair to say that you are one of the most credible people in the industry when it comes to origination and BD. So I'd love to ask, what is the difference between a good BD person and a great BD person?
Being proactive. In one word, proactive. And I'd love to expand on that. You can be an order taker. And because people know you're out there, you meet somebody, you wait for them to call you and say, hey, do you have a deal? By being proactive, and I'm not saying, God forbid, don't call up an investment bank and say, what do you have for me now? They don't want to hear that. They hear that from so many mediocre originators. What they want to hear is, hey, I just want to tell you what we're doing now, what we're working on, what we're focusing on. By the way, we do have companies for sale, and that rings a bell because the investment bank needs, they need to source exits as well, so they, to feed their firm. And when you're talking to them, get to know that person. I can't tell you how many people I've said, have you called this person? Well, I sent them an email. Even today, the young people coming on board, and that gets fixed very quickly. Okay, emails are fine. Once you have a contact, have you ever spoken to this guy? No. Do you know anything about him? No. Why don't you call them up? Out of sight, out of mind. If you can leave something behind with that person about who you are, when that maybe associate at another investment bank is being asked by the partner, who should we invite to this to get a teaser, he's going to think of you, or she's going to think of you. If you leave some memorable trait, it's about people, it's about memory. And again, out of sight, out of mind, no matter how memorable you are, if you're not constantly refreshing the memory banks of people, and we do it often because we do buy 60 companies a year and we sell 15 to 16. Again, a lot of them are small, but we send out a press release, so we're constantly reminding people we're active. That's not enough. You still need to have that person-to-person contact. They need to know you're around in case they have an opportunity to send to you. Same thing with seeing people in the circuit, whether it's an ACG event, meeting new investment bankers, new boutiques, new lenders, new lawyers. You don't know where your deal is going to come. You got to kiss 1,000 frogs and get one deal. 1% of everything we see, we buy.
I'd love to actually dive a little bit deeper into that, the numbers here, because I think that's also applicable to job transition. I think that there's not enough testing going on when it comes to job transition. And there is I think there's an expectation that is too high, that the first thing that comes out of the military, for example, needs to be something really good or great. But I'd love to know, like, maybe in your life, the experimentation that maybe intentionally or unintentionally happened, but resulted in actually something good in your career.
Yeah. Well, they say, and I heard this a long time ago, a resume is the ability to put eclectic experiences into career goals. I mean, not everybody is going to cure cancer by the time they're 21, and they're not going to be a Rhodes Scholar.
You were talking about just experimentation, and I guess the reason why I ask it is when I look back on the 10 years of my career 13 years of my career so far, I got so frustrated for years, and it literally took me 12 years to finally found what I love and what I'm passionate about. I'm curious just to know, like, how that has been for your life, and what advice you would have to people who are experimenting either in the transition or just generally in their job function and doing things that are different and new.
Yeah. When I graduated from college, I was told that you'll probably have one career, maybe different, same job, different companies, but you'll have one career in your lifetime. So make a good choice on that. And when my kids were in high school, I used to go to career day sophomore year, and I would tell these kids a little bit about my life, and then high school set that up for them. And I would ask them, I said, what do you want to do? And, it's like pulling teeth from these kids, but every once in a while, I want to do this, I want to do that. Okay. I said, well, let me just put a number up here on the board. I put a 1, a 3, and a 7. And the 1 was when I was in college, one career. By the time I got out of the military, well, after 6 years active duty, it had transitioned already back in the 70s, 80s, that people would probably have 3 careers, not jobs, or 3 different careers in their lifetime. And as of about 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't know what the number is now, but statistics have said that most people graduating from college will have 7 different careers, not 7 different jobs, but 7 different specific careers. Now, I've had my 3, and my 3 was military, investment banking, commercial banking, and PE, although PE and those all sort of merge together, but 3 different careers, 3 different, I think, different skill sets. And so I told these kids, and I would say the same thing to people out of college, find something that you think might be interesting. Doesn't have to be what has to be the most important thing, but grab onto it and learn from that. And just do it. Just grab on something that you think, and if it doesn't work, admit your mistake, or admit that you've learned something and you know what you don't want to do. It's easy when after you get out of college, your first job, but later on in the military, same thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's nothing perfect in life. In every job I've ever interviewed, I thought this is the place I'm going to live forever and work for. Riverside is, but I knew the firm before I joined. I knew the founders, one of the founders. We were friends. It didn't get me hired, but I knew him. I knew the way they worked, and it's just the right culture. But you don't always get lucky like that. So that resume that you've got there, take those eclectic experiences and learn on each one.
I love it. Going back to the topic on ACG, in the past couple of years, there have been a number of organizations that are either regionally focused or service focused or within a particular sub-community, like women in finance. And there might be 4 organizations that have started to develop. And, I think that what's on a lot of people's minds is, do I need to go to ACGs anymore? Which ones do I go to? Do I actually get deals out of this? Can you talk about where we are at right now with ACG New York and what you think the future of ACG New York is, and maybe even as of the organization?
Sure. I think there will always be a place for ACG. I don't think ACG has ever positioned themselves as the only organization you should be a part of to grow your database, to grow your contacts. But for the lower end of the middle, and especially for the lower end of the middle market, it is the foundation and the starting point. Now, I'm a little biased because I'm on the board of ACG New York, and I have been for a good part of these 18 years. I've come off a couple of times because we started to establish sort of grandfather, and you can only stay on. So I got off, and I still did the same job. I put together a PE to PE dinner every quarter. I've been advisor to the rest of the people when I wasn't on the board. It's the place that is the most accepting and open to bringing in people and getting to talk to lawyers, talk to buy side, talk to sell side, talk to investment bankers, talk to PE firms, anybody that's part of our market. Because you never know what part of the market is going to be hot, what part is not, where you're going to find your next transaction, particularly myself in origination. Our investment professionals, the guys who are doing the deals, some of them come to the events and we bring them to the ones that we think that are important. But if you're in business development, origination, that's essential as a starting point, because that's where you're going to meet people you would never see anyplace else. You go to Intergrowth, which is the big one that got canceled this year, you're not going to see all of the people. You're going to see the ones that can really afford to go there, the larger firms. You go to the local chapters. You don't have to go to every meeting, but you're going to constantly meet people you've never met before. And it goes to the same thing. You're going to learn from them. You're going to develop contacts. They will say, have you thought about this? Have you heard about this? People want to be helpful in this industry because what comes around goes around. You do for me, I'll do for you. It's a very egalitarian, I'll help you. It's a team effort. And everybody's there to buy a company, sell their services, but they're also there to network. And not just between the two people, but maybe they can refer something because, like I say, the circle there, what comes around goes around.
We've covered a ton of ground, and this type of podcast is precisely why I love doing this, where we just see who people really are. And I appreciate you taking the time for this.
I appreciate the hints, a little bit of walk down memory lane, some things that I hadn't thought about for many years, and it did sort of affect me a little bit, but I appreciate the opportunity.